Hello and welcome to this episode of ThePrint Mind Over Matter. Today I'm going to discuss something that often we use in a very loose term, OCD. Now OCD is something that we often refer to as मुझे तो OCD हो जाता है ये देख के. These are sentences that we often use in normal conversations. The problem with doing something like that is that it's an actual medical condition that needs attention. When we trivialize a matter like that, people often hesitate to seek medical help. But I'm not the expert. The expert is Dr. Shambhavi Jaiman, and she is going to actually tell us more about OCD and the impact it can have on the lives of people who have it, and also the impact it has when you're interacting with others in your life. Hi Shambhavi, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So the first question I have is, when exactly do we seek treatment for OCD? Because like my introduction already says that I think all of us have some form of quirks, I would rather call it quirks, where we think about, okay, this is something I want in a very, very particular way. But then I understand that there's a time when it starts interfering with somebody's personal daily life. So when exactly do we seek treatment?
So when we talk about OCD, the basic understanding, like you said, a lot of people use it very loosely. The term OC-like behavior or OC symptoms or I'm having OCD, it's used very, very loosely these days without understanding the gravity of the situation.
Right.
OCD is a very common mental illness. It is seen in 1 in 25 people. It is something which is very distressing. Now the question which you asked, that a lot of people might struggle with things when you read about it or when you hear somebody telling you about OCD, you might feel हाँ मैं भी ये करती हूँ या मैं भी ये करता हूँ, right? But that is not when you feel that you're having OCD. When we say that you're having OCD is the time when it starts impairing your functioning.
Okay.
For instance, there is a person who has OCD which is diagnosed by a psychiatrist. So उसमें क्या होता है कि आपको या मेरे को 15 मिनट लगेंगे तैयार होने में. Okay, somebody who's having OCD is diagnosed, they might take an hour or even more to get ready for 15 minutes. So that starts hampering. The whole schedule gets shifted. They're late for their work. They're not able to get out of their house on the correct time for their jobs or their chores. So वो functioning में hampering होने लग जाती है, and that's the correct time or that's the right time to seek treatment for OCD.
Okay, so could you tell us more about what usually is the treatment sort of sequence or procedure for somebody with OCD?
Okay, so जब हम OCD की बात करते हैं, the first and the foremost thing is that you have to have a diagnosis for it.
Okay.
So if you experience symptoms which are similar to what you've heard or what you've seen or what you've read, the first thing you need to do is get formally diagnosed. Go to a person who's capable of doing that, like a mental health professional. Tell them what you're experiencing, have the diagnosis. Once you have been diagnosed with OCD, then you can understand the forms of treatment, right? And the forms of treatment can include dawaiyan, can include therapy that we also call counseling, can include a combination of both of these.
Okay.
So that is how you proceed or you take a step towards taking treatment. And follow up with it is very, very important. So what happens कि हम जाते हैं, medicines लेते हैं या therapy start करते हैं, we start feeling better after a while, okay, and then we feel कि हाँ अब तो हम ठीक हो गए, then we stop it without the consent or without consulting the doctor or the psychotherapist again. So that is something which is not right. You have to take the treatment from a proper person. You have to get diagnosed before the treatment, and you have to follow up with the treatment only after the doctor says कि okay, now you can stop the medication or you can stop the therapy. Then you can stop it, not before that.
Okay, I want to actually, how again I began my intro, I'm sort of going back to that. So could you give us some examples that you may have also encountered with your patients of how much can it impact somebody's life? You already mentioned one example. Actually, I know somebody who was struggling because he had an OCD of cleanliness and washing his hands. He could not even hug his children. It had gotten to that extent where that's when he realized like how it's hampering. He loves his kids and he's unable to, because he feels like he needs to be completely clean before he sort of hugs them. So give us an example, because I think that would highlight how important it is, I think, to seek help.
Yes. So rightly said that examples are very easy for people to understand. So let me start from the basic thing कि OCD होता क्या है. So obsession is something कि वो thought हो सकती है, वो image हो सकती है, वो एक urge भी हो सकती है.
Right.
Okay. एंड इट कैन पर्टेन टू डिफरेंट एरियाज ऑफ लाइफ, लाइक यू सेड कि क्लीनिंग का किसी को है या वॉशिंग का किसी को है. इट कैन बी अ डाउट, इट कैन बी अ फ्योर, ओके, फ्योर ऑफ हार्मिंग योर सेल्फ और हार्मिंग समबडी एल्स. इट कैन बी ऑफ चेकिंग कि हमने लॉक तो कर दिया है या स्विच ऑफ तो कर दिया है बट वो फिर से चेक करना होता है, बिकॉज दैट इंट्रूसिव थॉट, द वर्ड हियर इज इंट्रूसिव बिकॉज इट इज़ वेरी वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू resist that thought.
Right.
So that is why we call it obsessive, that you're obsessively having a particular thought. Now the other aspect of it is compulsion. Compulsion is the counterpart कि हमें अगर obsession है गंदगी का या unhygienic feel होने का या ऐसा feel होने का हाथ साफ नहीं है, the compulsion would be washing your hands. Okay. Now when the obsession is कि हमें doubt है check करने का कि हमने बंद किया है, लॉक किया है इस तरह से, तो फिर the compulsion would be going and doing that, checking the lock or checking the switch. Now when what happens is there's a cycle basically. Okay, you have an obsession, उसकी वजह से anxiety हो जाती है, घबराहट सी महसूस होती है, then you do the compulsion which gives you a temporary relief. It's just a temporary solution and the cycle goes back. Again there's an obsession, the same obsession, and it just goes on. So there's a need to break this particular cycle. Okay, so for example, like I said, checking can be one. There can be washing, which can be one. There can be a fear of harming yourself or harming others. There is also something called as magical thinking, which I think I should mention. A lot of times, different cultures have different thinkings, thoughts.
Okay.
Right? Culturally, something might be right, but sometimes it is culturally not right. Okay, so magical thinking, let's say that some people develop this magical thinking of कि हमें कहीं भी घुसना है, any door we are crossing, we need to put our right feet forward. If we don't do that, फिर कुछ गलत होएगा.
Okay.
So because of that, there's an anxiety, and every time they are entering a door, they put their right feet forward. And if by chance they don't do that, then they go back, then they put the left feet or the right feet, whatever. And if again it is wrong, then again they'll do it. So that's how time consuming it can be, and that's how it can hamper your life. And it can get very distressing for the person. Imagine you're in a social setting, okay? You're with people whom you're working with, and imagine this is happening to you there. People will notice it, right? So that becomes very difficult for the person who's going through it, obviously, and also people who are dealing with it with them, like their families, friends, etc.
Okay, so I know that there is obviously a whole spectrum of mental illnesses that people experience, and we have a tendency, and it's also with physical ailments कि हम उसे categorize कर देते हैं कि this is important, this is ठीक है, मतलब not as important, right? And that's how we also schedule our treatment. Like इसके लिए help लेना ज़रूरी, like I'm just giving an example. It's like heart की problem है, oh it's a major thing, right? You have a fever and कोई बात नहीं, we'll just go tell the pharmacist to give us some medicine, right? That's how we do it. I was wondering if OCD is often relegated to something like a fever, ki it's not as major, because like I said that often we refer to, even like agar mujhe bhi hai, like every time I leave home in the morning, I was just thinking about it today, I'm always like gas band kiya ki nahi kiya. And I was also making fun of myself that I used to make fun of my mother when she used to do it, and now I'm sort of falling in the same trap in a way that maybe. But I also know that this is just a thing. This is a one-time thing, and I will probably not refer to it as an OCD, but somebody else might, right? Like if I tell that person twice ki hai. But do you think that because it is structured in such a way, or because it is the nature of the illness, that the treatment option जो होता है, जो लोग आते हैं, that does tend to get delayed maybe?
Definitely. I think you're absolutely right in saying a lot of people think कि ये तो दूसरे को भी होता है, ये तो it's a very common thing, ये तो normal है. A lot of people try to normalize it. A lot of people, because of the stigma which is there, right? The stigma around seeking help for mental health, people don't realize that your brain is a part of your body. तो अगर लिवर में दिक्कत हो रही है तो हम मेडिसिन ले रहे हैं, बट अगर हमारे दिमाग में कुछ दिक्कत हो रही है तो हम क्यों मेडिसिन नहीं ले रहे हैं? द स्टिग्मा ऑफ कि ओ ये तो पागल है, द कॉमन वर्ड्स व्हिच पीपल यूज, ओ ही इज अ साइको, ओ they are not fine mentally, they are unstable. So these can be things which can be hampering for the person who actually needs treatment because of the stigma. Right. Also, a lot of times there are various notions ki, when you go on medication or when you start medication for a certain mental health related concern, usse dikkat ho jati hai. Medicines are not good, their medicines are addictive. There are a lot of myths around the treatment and a lot of stigma which prevents a lot of people from going ahead and taking treatment, even though they're struggling. Right. Now, like you said, that a lot of people might have these symptoms, but not to the extent where it hampers their functioning, their day-to-day life. For example, if there's a person, like I said before, जिसको नहाने में normally हमें 15 मिनट लगते हैं, right? There are people, because of their sense of unhygienic feeling, the obsession of unhygienic feeling, उसकी वजह से इतना ज़्यादा time लेते हैं वो, that say they take half a day to take a bath. And what happens is that the family members obviously get disturbed by it. A lot of times they stop taking a bath because it's taking so much of time.
Right.
That itself becomes a new problem. Right. So there's a lot of stigma, there are a lot of myths around, OCD, OC-like symptoms, like people say, not to be used very loosely, not to be used in a very, lay manner, but that's why people like you are important, because you can have these kind of conversations, you can spread a lot of awareness, and that's why we are here today.
So you'd mentioned that there can be certain kinds, like you mentioned about cleanliness, you mentioned about, okay, people who have this thing about checking, but are there like proper categories or something about, okay, there are, let's say, X type of OCDs or something like that? Because often, see, most of us are guilty of doing this. हमें कोई भी बीमारी होती है, हम सबसे पहले Google जाते हैं. And now the problem with, I think, physical health, तो फिर भी आप कहीं ना कहीं ailments में there are more peer-reviewed sources, let's say, or authentic sources जहाँ पता कर सकते हो. And we joke, right, about it कि हर चीज़ में आपको कैंसर दिख सकता है if you actually Google. But I feel like the same people are now doing for mental health, because since, like you mentioned, there is so much stigma around it. Before you even think of going and telling it to even a close person, whoever it could be, we start, Googling about it. And then sometimes you get these, like, there are 10, 20 types and all of it. So I was wondering if there are actually 10, 20 types, or is it like something that has been more of an internet phenomena?
Okay, so when we are talking about OCD, it can be categorized in the sense किसी को ज़्यादा obsessions हो सकते हैं, किसी को predominantly compulsions हो सकते हैं, या there can be a mixture of both. Right. So those are the categories. But when we are talking in general about OCD, there's no particular type of OCD. There's an OCD which pertains to washing for somebody, or which pertains to checking for somebody, or which pertains to fear of harming themselves, or fear of harming somebody else. So yes, there are these subcategories कि इसमें इस तरह का obsession है, but उसके basis पे ये नहीं है कि OCD is divided into different kinds. Okay. So it's just the symptoms keep changing, but it will be called OCD. Okay.
Coming back actually to an important question, a lot of illnesses, like in terms of physical ailments, अक्सर हम बोलते हैं हाँ ये genetic है, like if my father has diabetes, there's a high risk that I'm going to have. So what about OCD? Like, is there any particular reason why a person develops this? Like in a lot of other instances, there are instances like trauma. There's a traumatic event because of which, we are trying to cope with that traumatic event, and our bodies found a solution, whatever works, right? Or is it genetic, anything like that?
Yes, so there can be multiple causes. All the mental illnesses, I would say, have multiple causes. So there can be a biological cause for it, which includes, like you said, genetics. It is definitely something which runs in the family. It is hereditary. Okay. The second aspect of the biological aspect is the neurotransmitters, or the chemicals which we say are there in our brain. Okay. But the most robust of this is the serotonergic imbalance. Okay. So serotonin is a neurotransmitter, is a chemical which is present in our brain. There is an imbalance in that which can lead to OCD. Okay. There can also be psychological problems, like psychological causes, where your childhood, how your childhood has been, your experiences, your personality, all those things play a role. So this is called a biopsychosocial phenomena, or a model of explaining why OCD, but these are the broadly divided causes which we can say for OCD. Okay.
So now actually it came to me in one of my stories that I was doing, where this person told me how stress in their lives had a direct impact on their physical health. And for me, and even for her, because she was trying to seek a solution, even for the doctors actually, it was so new that stress can get to such an extent that it can have a direct physical implication. So I was wondering, we all live in such a high stress, and especially if you're living, like, for example, in a city like NCR, there is like multiple factors going on 24/7. Most of us can't switch off, right, in any point. Like even if you have our phone off for 1 hour, we'll all get some form of anxiety about, oh, you know, I missed some information. So I wanted to understand if stress is a big factor in OCD as well.
Definitely, stress is a factor which is a precipitating factor.
Okay.
So there would be a reason as to the core reason of OCD would be a serotonergic imbalance,
Right.
something, you know, related to your genetics. But stress is something which can precipitate your already existing predisposition to developing OCD.
Okay.
So stress plays a role, definitely, but it's not that if somebody is not stressed, they can't develop OCD. It can be a causing factor, but it's not the core factor, core causing factor.
Achha. I also wanted to know that sometimes we say that there's a particular group, gender, age or something like that, which is more susceptible to developing a particular form of illness. So OCD के केस में भी ऐसा कुछ है?
OCD के केस में क्या होता है कि जब हम onset कहते हैं, you know, the starting point, that can be more commonly seen when a person is between the age group of 14 to 19 years old. Okay, the teen years or the early adulthood. But given that it can occur at any point of time, it's not कि तब हुआ तो हुआ वरना नहीं होगा. बाद में भी हो सकता है, but the most common age group, like we say, is between 14 to 19. With regards to males and females, and I think it's a equally divided thing. I don't think there's any thing कि एक sex में ज़्यादा देखा जाता है rather than the other sex. So I think age-wise भी and gender-wise भी, it's a quite generalized sort of predisposition where you can have.
Okay. So this is my last question. I want to know because in general, like because we have talked and you've also mentioned how people sort of hesitate to come take treatment. But if we have some kind of maybe percentage model, would you be able to tell us like these many people, or have you seen any changes in the at least in the amount of people who are coming to seek help? Because I do understand that now, since we are having certain conversations, people at least feel brave enough to take the first step. Maybe not continue, like you said, that some people might give up midway and think कि अब हो गया treatment, right? But do you think that there has been any improvement or there has been change in the way people have decided to seek treatment?
Definitely. I think there has been an improvement in the knowledge about mental health, especially post-COVID, I think. Because a lot of people, because they were at home, they were getting to hear a lot of stories. There was a lot of information which was genuine, right sources, which was spreading information about, you know, how things are affecting your mental health. And people were actually genuinely requiring it. So they came forward during that time. There is an improvement, but I think that it's a long way to go before we can say that, okay, you know, mental health is equivalent to our physical health.
Right. Thank you so much, Shambhavi, because even for me, this was like a big learning experience, I think. So I would actually like to end the episode by saying that let's not trivialize mental health issues. Let's learn to actually reframe our language, because one of the first things that help people, especially those who are struggling in any form of, you know, mental health issue, is how they are perceived by somebody else, and especially by our loved ones, because that's where everything starts, right? Be it family, be it friends, be it partner, whoever it is. If we can do anything else, maybe just stop using words like OCD loosely. Understand that for somebody it's such a you're belittling somebody who's experiencing a very, very tough situation in their lives. So maybe start with the language, if nothing else. And like Shambhavi explained, if you are somebody who think that, even if it's not, maybe if you feel that there are certain symptoms that are impairing your daily life, you should probably go in for a check. I mean, if you have fever, I'm sure you go in and get at least one opinion from a doctor. So the next time you feel like there is some issue going on with your mental health, maybe it's a good start to just go and seek one opinion about what you're experiencing. I think that always helps. Thank you for watching this episode. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on our social media handles. Thank you.